Thanks for joining me this week. It's been a while since we last talked about our virtual pilgrimage through the book 21 Things You May Not Know About the Indian Act by Bob Joseph. It's been a while. We took a break at the beginning of December, and we're right back into it with the 9th thing. So thanks for joining me. And again, if you've read ahead, perfectly fine. I'm happy that you're reading the book. I'm happy that maybe you're encouraging people to purchase the book and to learn more about these things around the Indian Act. Maybe you're also checking out resources like movies or documentaries. Maybe you're seeing other books that you're enjoying reading as well. This is not a difficult book to read, and to take it over several months might be feeling painful to you. I hope you're taking it sort of as if you've read the whole book, that's great. And every so often you're checking in with these reflections and giving yourself some time to take this in again as you read through it again, maybe a second time or even a third time. I'm so grateful to have you on this journey. I am the Reverend John Borthwick, and I'm the minister at St. Andrew's in Guelph, and I'm inviting so many others in my congregation to do just the same. So this week, as we start the new year of 2023, we're looking at number 9, which is Prohibited the Sale of Intoxicants to Indians, again from 1884 to who knows when. There's still some issues around this. And so again, this is around controlling Indigenous people's lives, sometimes livelihood, putting restrictions on how they are able to navigate the world, which would be different from other people who navigate the world every single day. Basically, it was an act of legislation that suppressed any sales of liquor to the Indigenous community, a way of controlling their access, a way of making sure that they wouldn't have that. And you really need to hear the paragraph that Bob speaks to of this related to this. So let's listen to Bob's words here. In the early days of the Indian Act, one intent behind the alcohol ban was the belief that if Indians were able to access alcohol, they wouldn't be diligently working their farmland. In other words, they should not be on the reserve, they should be on the reserve, working land that in many cases was not arable. They were expected to farm with rudimentary hand tools because they were denied access to modern farm tools. These are things that we talked about previous weeks. And if they did manage to grow anything, they weren't allowed to sell it without a permit to leave the reserve or the permit required to sell their produce. The government and mainstream society also did not want to rub elbows with Indians in licensed drinking establishments, and the licensed establishments feared a decrease in customers. We need to take in that intentional, that obvious racist perspective, white supremacist perspective, colonizing, civilizing perspective that says we can't allow them to have alcohol because then they wouldn't do the things that they're supposed to do. And if we gave them alcohol or said that they could have alcohol, oh my goodness, they might turn up at our pub or our bar, and we just can't have that, can we? Further to this is the piece that Bob puts in here around, this is all during the time of World War I and World War II. And during the wars, enlisted Indians or Indigenous people were legally allowed to drink throughout the war with their comrades, with the people they were fighting alongside for, with the Dominion flag on. They're representing Canada. They were allowed to drink, enlisted men. But when they came back to Canada, they were denied that. Veterans of wars were banned from legions. They weren't allowed to go there. They couldn't drink with their comrades after the war. They couldn't be seen or be present in the legion. Stunning. Again, men who fought in the wars for our country, barred access to something as simple as being able to have a drink with your comrades at the Legion. People you fought alongside, people who lost friends in the wars. Just alongside you, you're not allowed to socialize with them. In Saskatchewan, under Premier Tommy Douglas, he offered this commentary in 1960. He was petitioning the federal government for a change. He said, "We are having this trouble because we are reaping the harvest of 50 years or more of making the Indian a second-class citizen. We are going to have to make up our minds whether we are going to keep the Indian bottled up in a sort of Canadian apartheid or whether we are going to let him become a good citizen." And Tommy Douglas, as Bob articulates it, cautioned that while the Indian has been given equal rights, he has had no more right to break the law than the white man. If he is drunk or causing a disturbance, then he should be put out of the premises the same as a white man should, but he should not be put out just because he is an Indian. In 1960, Tommy Douglas, Premier of Saskatchewan, is speaking the words of anti-racism that needed to be said into that context. So we're grateful for that. Grateful that someone would say something like that, would advocate for that. And yet things didn't change much, if at all. Alcoholism within the Indigenous community has been a prevalent issue. It often is a prevalent issue among those who have experienced generational trauma, those who have experienced the challenges of living sometimes in a reality and spirit of hopelessness. There's been lots of conversation around how one addresses that. This prohibition piece may be a part of the complexity of this situation as well, but all the way up into the 1980s, and I experienced this myself when I grew up in Northern Ontario and when we'd visit regularly, there was always a perception by the locals that the Indigenous community were people who were just getting drunk all the time. It was a part of the mainstream society's perception of Indigenous people. And that has played into this racist view of the Indigenous community. That has played into a victim kind of mentality, or at least a pushing that on to Indigenous peoples, that somehow they're victims. And yet they are a resilient community. They are a community that is seeking to keep its culture, its language, its ancestry, its heritage alive. And while they've been doing that, they've had struggles just like anyone else in this world who's faced challenges, who's found things difficult, who's experienced trauma and has tried to cope. And yet, as a people, they've been painted with a wide brush that says they can't be trusted with alcohol. That's been a perception throughout all the way back to the 1800s and to this very day. All started by the Indian Act's imposition to say, you can't do this, you can't do that, and your lives are going to be controlled every single day. This must give us pause as we read 21 things you may not know about the Indian Act, and as we reflect on this act still existing in our country of Canada in the 2020s. Something to reflect on today. Thank you.